If you break your arm right now, your brain is going to instantly light up with pain signals.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? It's like this evolutionary alarm bell. Your body is just screaming that something is fundamentally wrong and, needs immediate attention.
Yes, it's an undeniable biological response.
Exactly. But here's the wild part. If you were to look at an fMRI scan of a brain going through a sudden unexpected breakup or the moment someone gets fired from a job they've held for 20 years,
The brain lights up in the exact same way.
the exact same way.
Hmm.
Specifically, this region called the anterior cingulate cortex. To your brain's neurochemistry, there is absolutely zero difference between a shattered bone and a shattered identity.
It is a profound biological reality that we, quite frankly, often try to ignore. I mean, the physical sensation of a hollow chest, the literal ache you feel in your heart when your world collapses.
Yeah, like an actual gut punch.
Right. That is not a metaphor. Your nervous system is processing a devastating injury.
And that is exactly where we are starting today. There is this incredibly universal yet deeply isolating feeling that almost every single one of you listening to this right now has experienced.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's that moment of sudden world-shifting loss. Maybe it was that romantic breakup that came completely out of nowhere, or maybe it was a lost job that you had tied your entire sense of self-worth to.
Or a shattered dream that you had been building your life around since you were a kid.
Right. It's that specific, terrifying second where the ground just drops out from underneath you and you are left falling in the dark.
It creates a profound disorientation. The entire architecture of your reality changes in a single instant. And the brain basically scrambles to map a territory that no longer exists.
And normally, how do we treat that feeling? We treat heartbreak like an anomaly.
Like a bug in the system.
Exactly, like a glitch in the human operating system that we need to fix or medicate or just distract ourselves from until it goes away. We tell people to just move on or get over it.
Which is incredibly unhelpful.
So unhelpful. But for this deep dive, we are jumping into a source that completely flips that narrative on its head. We are pulling from a truly fascinating book called Threads, Every Story is a Lifeline.
Co-authored by Glenda Sumale and Vipresh Dwivedi.
Yes, and the mission of our deep dive today is to completely reframe the concept of heartbreak.
Which is a vital reframing for anyone trying to understand their own life trajectory. I mean, we usually confine the word heartbreak strictly to the realm of romance.
Right, like teen movies and pop songs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Sumale and Dwivedi radically expand it. They explore heartbreak as an essential, biological, and deeply philosophical catalyst for the evolution of the self. They argue that a life completely insulated from heartbreak is, by definition, a life insulated from meaning.
I want to promise you, the listener, right up front, yes, we are talking about a heavy topic.
It is heavy.
We are going to be exploring loss and grief and the breaking of things we hold dear. But the destination we are heading toward today is incredibly helpful.
It really is.
Because the core thesis of this book isn't just a catalog of human suffering.
Not at all. The central argument is grounded in both neuroscience and existential philosophy. What's fascinating here is that the authors take that biological reality, the fact that social rejection and physical pain share the same neural pathways, and they ask why.
Right, like why are we built this way?
Exactly. Why would evolution design us to feel physical agony when a relationship ends? Well, the answer is that for early humans, isolation meant death.
Wow, so survival.
Connection is a biological imperative. Therefore, the pain of heartbreak is the ultimate proof of life. It is the mechanism by which we gauge the depth of our connections, and ultimately, it is the tool we use to grow and adapt.
Okay, let's unpack this. And let's start exactly where people expect a discussion on heartbreak to begin, which is romantic loss.
A very natural starting point.
But the book doesn't give us cliches. It immediately dives into the unexpected, gritty realities of what connection actually costs us. There's this one story in the first chapter that just gutted me.
The lover.
Yes, it's simply called The Lover. And the imagery is so visceral. You have this person stepping into their house, a place that used to be an absolute sanctuary.
It was a space defined by shared warmth, by inside jokes echoed off the walls, by the profound safety of being known by another person.
Right. And then they walk in and they describe looking at this plush couch in the living room.
Just a normal piece of furniture.
But for years, that couch hosted late-night conversations, arguments, reconciliations, movie marathons. They look at the kitchen table that hosted hundreds of shared dinners. And now, all of it feels totally foreign.
It feels cold.
The house hasn't physically changed, But the reality of the space has collapsed because of this crushing weight of a solitary note left on the table that simply says, "I'm sorry."
It's devastating.
In that single heartbeat, years of shared dreams just dissolve into thin air.
The physical emptiness of that room perfectly mirrors the psychological emptiness. The author synthesized this deeply personal agony by bringing in the existential philosophy of Jean-Paul Sartre and Søren Kierkegaard.
Oh boy, bringing out the heavy hitters.
Right. Specifically, they explore the concepts of the void and nothingness.
Okay, wait, I want to make sure we don't lose anyone in the philosophical weeds here. How exactly does a 19th century Danish philosopher apply to a modern breakup note left on a kitchen table? I mean, what is this void?
To put it simply, Kierkegaard wrote extensively about a specific kind of angst or dread. He described it as the dizziness of freedom.
The dizziness of freedom.
Yes. When you are in a committed relationship, your identity is tethered. You know who you are in relation to this other person. You know what you are doing on Friday night.
You know whose parents you're seeing for the holidays.
Exactly. You have a shared map of the future. When that relationship ends abruptly, you aren't just losing the person. You are losing the identity you held in relation to that person.
You're losing the we.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Heartbreak violently strips away our illusions of a fixed identity. Suddenly, you are staring into the void of your own absolute freedom. You have to decide who you are entirely on your own without that tether.
That sounds terrifying.
It is. The lover in this story is left vulnerable before the abyss of their own existence. That dizzying angst is the realization that the future they had meticulously planned no longer exists, and they are forced to reconstruct themselves entirely from nothingness.
Let me push back on that a little bit, though, because when you say reconstruct themselves from nothingness, it makes it sound like the person they were before the relationship just vanished.
I see what you mean.
Like, doesn't that diminish the individual? Aren't they still the exact same person who walked out the door that morning?
Biologically, yes. But psychologically, no. Our brains are predictive engines. We build our daily reality based on what we expect to happen.
Okay, that makes sense.
When a core pillar of your predictive model is removed, the brain literally experiences a system failure. You aren't the same person because the context that gave your actions meaning has been removed.
So the whole framework is gone.
That is why it feels terrifying. But, as Kierkegaard argues, confronting that void is also the absolute prerequisite for true, authentic self-discovery. You cannot build a new, more resilient identity until the old one has been cleared away.
That is a staggering way to look at it. You aren't just mourning the partner, you are grieving the sudden death of the version of you that existed with them.
Precisely.
And speaking of the illusions of identity, the book takes this concept of who we think we are and thrusts it into the digital age with the second story in this section. This is about a programmer named Alex and a woman he meets online named Mia.
This narrative brilliantly highlights the intersection of digital connection and human vulnerability,
It really does.
and how we often use technology to hide from the void we were just discussing.
Right. So Alex is someone who views programming as his ultimate sanctuary. In code, logic reigns supreme. If you write the syntax correctly, the program runs.
He has total control over the environment.
Exactly. He meets Mia on a specialized programming forum, and they start building this incredible digital universe together. They talk for hours on end, they write code collaboratively, they share their deepest dreams and fears through text.
A very deep mental connection.
But here's the catch. Alex is absolutely terrified to actually meet her in person.
He is paralyzed by it.
Completely crippled by this fear that he is just a socially awkward avatar. He believes that the real-world, flesh-and-blood version of him could never possibly live up to the witty, confident digital fantasy he has curated for Mia.
It is a profoundly modern manifestation of a very old fear, the fear of our own human messiness.
Yeah, being perceived.
Right. In the digital space, Alex can edit his responses.
Yeah.
He can carefully craft his persona. He is operating in an environment of controlled inputs and outputs.
Okay, let's unpack this. We want human relationships to function like clean code. We want to believe that if we input the right amount of effort, the output will automatically be love and stability.
A very comforting illusion.
But humans are incredibly messy hardware. You can't just debug a person. You can't release a patch to fix an awkward silence or an emotional trigger.
That is a perfect analogy.
Relationships are full of edge cases and unhandled exceptions that we just can't anticipate.
The unhandled exception in this case is the unpredictability of physical presence. When they were texting, Alex is receiving predictable hits of dopamine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with anticipation and reward.
Every time his phone buzzes.
Exactly. But physical presence requires oxytocin. That's the hormone of deep bonding, which requires actual, vulnerable, unpredictable physical proximity.
And the book highlights something so crucial here. Eventually, they do agree to meet at a local coffee shop. And it is not a movie-perfect romantic comedy moment where their eyes meet and the music swells.
It is remarkably, almost painfully tense.
It's excruciatingly awkward. They sit down, and the witty banter they had online just completely evaporates. There is this lingering heavy tension. They're both sipping their coffee, avoiding eye contact.
The reality is setting in.
Finally, the silence breaks. Mia admits, her voice kind of shaking, that she feels like she might be overthinking things and ruining the moment. And Alex, instead of trying to play it cool or deploy some witty line, just drops the avatar completely.
He embraces the vulnerability.
In a moment of pure, raw honesty, he admits, I think I just want everything to be perfect and I'm terrified that I'm not.
What's fascinating here is how the authors use this incredibly uncomfortable interaction to illustrate what they call the paradox of connection.
The paradox of connection.
Yes. As a species, we desperately crave closeness. As we discussed with the neuroscience, we are biologically wired to need each other. Yet we frequently self-sabotage out of a profound fear of vulnerability.
We push people away.
We build walls to protect ourselves from the potential heartbreak of being truly seen and then rejected.
We'd rather keep the flawless algorithm of a fantasy than risk the messy reality of a real person.
Precisely.
Hmm.
Alex wanted the flawless algorithm of love. But real love requires exposing our true, imperfect selves to the potential of rejection.
Which is terrifying.
The irony is that the moment they acknowledge the awkwardness, the moment they both admit their fear and imperfection, the real relationship actually begins.
Oh, that's beautiful.
The fantasy dies, which is a micro-heartbreak in itself, but it makes room for authentic connection.
They stop being avatars and start being real people navigating the complexities of actual connection. The unhandled exception becomes the foundation of their bond.
Exactly.
But, as much as romantic heartbreak or the fear of rejection hurts, the authors of Threads pivot to something that I think is an arguably more silent, more insidious grief. And if you are listening to this right now, I guarantee you have faced this.
Everyone has.
It is the heartbreak of losing the future you thought you were going to have.
Yes. Romantic love is just one type of expectation we set for ourselves. But what happens when the blueprint for your entire life, your career trajectory, your overarching sense of purpose, what happens when that collapses?
This section hit me incredibly hard. They tell the story of a college dropout. And they don't just gloss over it, they really paint the picture.
They dive right into the grit of it.
Right. This is a student who had meticulously planned out their entire life since high school to get an advanced engineering degree. They did everything right. They got the grades, they got the acceptance letters, they built their entire identity around the phrase, I am going to be an engineer.
They constructed their personal narrative around a very specific destination.
Exactly. But then an external shock shatters the narrative. Severe family financial strain hits. We are talking unexpected medical emergencies back home, rising bills, inflation.
Things completely out of their control.
Suddenly, the financial support from their parents vanishes. This student is forced to juggle a graveyard shift at a local diner, smelling like grease during their morning lectures, and picking up a weekend retail job just to make rent.
The physical and mental exhaustion completely eclipses their academic ambition.
Just survival mode.
The structural reality of their life can literally no longer support the dream they had built. It is a structural failure.
And there's this devastating scene described in the book. The student is sitting in the hushed campus library late at night. They are staring at a thermodynamics textbook. Their eyes are burning from sleep deprivation. And they look around.
And what do they see?
They see their peers, students who don't have to worry about how they are going to afford groceries next week, effortlessly studying, navigating college life so easily. And in that quiet, glowing library, they hit their breaking point. The math just doesn't work anymore.
It was unsustainable.
They realize they have to drop out. So they sit there and write this agonizing, tear-stained letter to their parents, fully expecting crushing disappointment. They feel like a colossal failure.
They are experiencing the grief of a deferred dream, but the book notes the unexpected grace of the parents' response.
Yeah, this part was so touching.
The parents don't express disappointment. They respond with pure love, telling the student that their physical and mental health matters infinitely more than a piece of paper.
which is a beautiful, deeply moving moment of connection. And let me play devil's advocate here, even with supportive parents, it doesn't immediately erase the shame, does it?
Not instantly, no.
The label of dropout still hangs over them. Society tells us that if you quit, you failed. How do we differentiate between a healthy, necessary pivot and just giving up when things get hard?
It's a very fair question.
Because it's easy to call it a guidepost in hindsight after things work out, but in the moment, isn't it just a failure?
That is the exact crux of the issue, and it's why the authors focus on it. In the moment, it feels like a terminal failure because our brains are trapped in what economists call the sunk cost fallacy.
Oh, the sunk cost fallacy. I've heard of this.
Yes. You have invested so much time, money, and identity into this engineering path that your brain tells you that abandoning it means all that investment was wasted.
Right, like I've come this far, I can't quit now.
Exactly. But the authors argue that the heartbreak of failure is actually a vital signal. It forces a disruption of neuroplasticity. When the rigid path is blocked, the brain is forced to look for lateral solutions. It wasn't that the student was giving up because the math was hard. They were yielding to an insurmountable structural reality.
Okay, so what happens next? They go back to their hometown, they work full-time at that diner, and they have to suffer through watching their former classmates' post-graduation photos and job offers on social media.
That is a daily recurring heartbreak.
It really is. But here's the pivot you mentioned. While working at the diner, they notice the restaurant's website is a total disaster. Just out of boredom and curiosity, they start playing around with the code to fix it.
A small lateral move.
Right. They realize they actually enjoy the immediate, tangible problem-solving of web development way more than the abstract theory of engineering. They start going to local tech meetups in the evenings, immersing themselves in a totally different, scrappy community of self-taught coders.
They find a new tribe.
Eventually, they land a startup internship and build a completely new, incredibly successful career in software development.
The authors are examining the profound concept of finding purpose in the pursuit itself, rather than the rigidly defined destination.
The pursuit itself?
Yes. The heartbreak of dropping out wasn't an indicator of terminal failure. It was the necessary friction required to redirect their trajectory toward a path that was actually more aligned with their innate problem-solving skills and their current reality.
I want to pause and just ask you, the listener, to really think about this for a second. How many of us are currently trapped in the sunk cost fallacy of our own dreams?
More than we'd like to admit.
You know exactly what I mean. You've invested so much time, so much money, and so much of your ego into a specific career path or a specific goal that you refuse to see when it is literally destroying your mental health or when a vastly better path has opened up right next to you.
We put blinders on.
This student realized that a detour isn't a dead end. Sometimes the dream has to die so you can actually live.
Exactly. And the authors pair this internal professional expectation with another powerful narrative about expectations, this time centered on geographic and cultural displacement. This is the story of the small-town dreamer.
Oh man, this one. Yes. This explores the agonizing tension between the cozy, familiar gravity of a hometown and the burning, almost painful desire for the expansive possibilities of the city.
It's a very common human conflict.
We have a high school student who receives an acceptance letter to a prestigious university in a major metropolis. It's the ticket out.
Yeah.
But instead of pure, unadulterated joy, the moment they open the envelope, they are hit with a wave of immense guilt.
Guilt for wanting to leave.
They show the letter to their parents at the kitchen table, and instead of cheering, the parents' faces just fall. There is a heavy silence, and the father softly asks, "What about us? What about your home here?"
That is a devastating question to ask an ambitious child.
Just a total gut punch.
It perfectly captures the specific heartbreak of ambition. The child is suddenly made to feel that pursuing personal growth and intellectual expansion is somehow equated with betraying the family's love and legacy. It forces a false dichotomy between loyalty and individual identity.
It's an impossible choice. The student eventually does go to the city, and the first few weeks are this chaotic mix of exhilaration and deep, bone-aching homesickness.
The transition is never clean.
The phone calls home are agonizing. They are tinged with this heavy, unspoken longing. The student feels like they are living two separate lives, unable to fully enjoy the city because of the guilt, and unable to connect with home because of the distance.
They're stuck in the middle.
But eventually, the student comes to a profound philosophical realization. They realize that pursuing personal ambition does not necessitate abandoning their roots. They learn to integrate their hometown values into their new life by organizing community service initiatives in the city that mirror the mutual aid networks of their small town.
This raises an important question about how we define success and authenticity. The authors, Vibresh Dwivedi and Glenda Sumale, actually step out from behind the curtain here and weave their own personal reflections into this exact section of the book.
I loved this part. It made the theory feel so grounded.
Indeed. Vibresh discusses his own internal, agonizing struggle between his deep passion for art and the intense societal and familial pressure for practicality and financial stability.
The classic artist's dilemma.
He talks about the heartbreak of wondering if his artistic drive was just a fanciful illusion that he needed to abandon to be a responsible adult. Conversely, Glenda shares her profound conflict between pursuing deep spiritual, metaphysical connections and the pressure to adhere to the practical, often cynical demands of everyday societal norms.
They both essentially had to learn that fear and heartbreak are natural, permanent companions on the path to ambition. You don't eliminate the fear. You don't cure the heartbreak of leaving the familiar. You just have to stop letting that fear drive the car.
Precisely. They emphasize that the pursuit of a dream, even when deferred, altered, or geographically distant, holds intrinsic value.
It's the journey, not just the destination.
Right. The heartbreaks we encounter along the way, the guilt, the setbacks, the parental disappointment, are not signs that we should stop and turn back. They are the friction that proves we are moving forward. They are evidence of our deep desire to live fully. The struggles become the very roots of our resilience.
And speaking of roots, the tension of the small-town dreamer leaving home naturally pulls us into the third major area the book explores. Once you leave home, or once the home itself changes, you have to confront the fractures, frictions, and the very fabric of family.
Because family isn't static.
Because displacement, whether it is emotional displacement or physical distance, challenges the core foundation of how modern families function.
Family is our origin story. It provides our first neural pathways for understanding love, security, and trust. But when that foundational structure fractures, the psychological displacement can be profound and lifelong.
Let's talk about the story of the child of a broken family. This narrative is incredibly layered. When the parents separate, the child isn't just moving between two houses. They're essentially psychologically split in half.
They're managing two realities.
They are suddenly forced to navigate two entirely different sets of rules, two different daily routines, and two different emotional climates. And bubbling underneath all of it is this immense, quiet guilt.
The guilt of divided loyalty.
Exactly. If the child is genuinely enjoying a weekend at their dad's house, laughing, playing games, they suddenly feel a pang of intense guilt for missing their mom or for knowing their mom is alone. They feel like a traitor just for experiencing joy in the other parent's absence.
What's fascinating here is the psychological adaptation that occurs within the developing brain. The book points out that children in these fractured situations often take on an unspoken monumental responsibility.
They become the adults in the room.
They instinctively become the emotional peacekeepers of the family dynamic. They learn to carefully navigate every conversation, to constantly scan the adults' faces for micro-expressions of anger or sadness, and to actively withhold innocent information about one house that might trigger friction in the other.
If you are a child of divorce listening to this, I want you to ask yourself how early you learned to read a room.
Very early, usually.
These kids become hyper-aware of adult emotional volatility long before their brains are fully equipped to process it. They lose the privilege of careless childhood innocence.
Yes, their innocence is heavily tinged with adult awareness. However, and this is where the reframing is crucial, the authors argue that this brokenness, this specific childhood heartbreak, forges an incredible lifelong superpower, hyper-empathy.
Because they've been training in emotional intelligence since they were 7 years old.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Because they have spent a lifetime navigating a fractured internal landscape and managing the emotional weather of adults, they intuitively understand the unseen burdens of others.
They see what others miss.
As they grow older and process this grief, they stop being mere passive survivors of their parents' choices. They become the architects of their own story. They take that hyper-empathy and use it to completely redefine what family means to them, often building incredibly strong, intentional networks of chosen families.
They realize that family isn't a fixed, perfect biological mold that you were just born into. It's a fluid, active creation. But that fluidity is really put to the absolute test when physical distance is introduced into the family dynamic.
Distance changes everything.
The book tells the story of the long-distance grandmother, which I think is a perfect, tragic snapshot of modern life. She is an elderly woman sitting by her window, feeling completely relegated to being just a pixelated face on a weekly video call.
It perfectly illustrates the technological paradox of our era.
Right. The screen connects them instantly across thousands of miles, but it's cold glass. There is lag, the screens freeze at the worst moments, the audio cuts out. She misses the sensory realities of love.
The things you can't digitize.
The smell of her grandkids' hair, the physical weight of them in her lap, the ability to wipe away a tear. Through the screen, she feels like a passive extra in the busy movie of their lives rather than the matriarch. So to bridge this agonizing gap, she starts writing physical, handwritten letters.
A beautiful gesture.
She sends small packages, pouring her love, her generational wisdom, and her heritage into these tangible envelopes.
She is desperately trying to build a tangible legacy that can cross the digital void. She wants them to have something they can hold.
But then comes the heartbreaking twist. She gets a phone call from her daughter. The daughter, in a moment of tearful confession, admits that she's been hiding the letters. She never gave a single one to the kids.
It's hard to hear.
And her reasoning is that she was trying to protect the children from missing a grandmother they rarely got to see in person. She thought the letters would just make them sad.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Let me stop you right there because I have to push back on this daughter's reasoning. Was the daughter actually protecting the kids, or was she protecting herself from the overwhelming guilt of the distance?
That is the big question.
Because seeing those handwritten letters arrive on the kitchen counter every week is a glaring physical reminder of the void she created by moving her family away. The letters are evidence of the grandmother's pain.
That is a very astute psychological read, and it is exactly what the authors imply. The daughter's actions, while perhaps rationalized as well-intentioned on a surface level, are a deep psychological defense mechanism against her own heartbreak.
She's shielding herself.
The authors use this to highlight the dual nature of technology. It provides the illusion of instant communication, but it paradoxically deepens the void of physical absence because it highlights exactly what is missing. The daughter couldn't handle the tangible physical proof of that absence, so she hid the letters to maintain the sterile, controlled environment of the video call.
It's easier to manage a scheduled Zoom call than a messy, emotional letter. But the resolution of this story is just incredibly beautiful. The grandmother doesn't yell, she doesn't get defensive, she hears the pain in her daughter's voice, and she simply asks, "Can I come visit?"
She takes action.
She books a ticket, travels there, and when she arrives, she doesn't scold anyone. She sits the kids down on the floor, pulls them physically close to her, opens the box of hidden letters, and reads them out loud one by one. She realizes her legacy isn't meant to be stored in distant memories or hidden envelopes. It must be activated in the present moment of physical connection.
It's a profound reclaiming of her matriarchal role. She refuses to be digitized. And this theme of geographic distance and the heavy cost of sacrifice is echoed intensely in the next narrative they present, The Immigrant Heart.
Oh, this one is tough. This explores the specific heartbreak of leaving a tight-knit rural village for a fast-paced, foreign metropolitan city in order to financially support the family back home.
A very common global reality.
It's a story of economic migration, which is incredibly common, but the emotional and psychological cost is staggering. The new city is overwhelming, the language is different, the culture is deeply unwelcoming and individualistic. But the real cutting heartbreak doesn't happen on the city streets. It happens on the phone calls back home.
It is the agonizing realization that you are moving out of sync with your own origin. The temporal and cultural dissonance becomes impossible to ignore.
Yes, the immigrant is calling their childhood friends, desperately trying to hold on to those old bonds, but slowly, week by week, they realize that their friends and family are moving on without them.
Life continues without them.
The inside jokes don't make sense anymore. The daily village events, weddings, local disputes, births, they aren't a part of it. They feel like a ghost lingering on the edges of their own past. At the same time, they are changing to fit the survival demands of the new city, which makes them feel like an utter stranger when they do manage to visit their home village.
They belong neither here nor there.
They are torn between two completely different worlds.
This raises an important question about the legacy of sacrifice. The immigrant's profound heartbreak, this feeling of permanent exile, is the literal price of admission for their family's physical survival and future prosperity.
It's a heavy price.
The authors note that the immigrant eventually has to accept that their heart will forever be split. There is no magical integration where the pain disappears. However, They find a new, chosen community in the city with other immigrants from different backgrounds who share that exact specific loneliness.
Finding connection in the shared pain.
The heartbreak doesn't go away, but it is transmuted. It becomes a powerful, shared legacy of resilience and mutual support.
It's almost like the heartbreak stretches their capacity to love across oceans. The cracks in their heart create the space to hold two worlds at once. But eventually, whether you stay in a small town, move to a big city, or cross an ocean, family lays the foundation.
It's the starting point.
But you can't stay on the foundation forever. Eventually, we all have to step off it and navigate the world on our own terms. We have to figure out who we are outside the context of our parents and our siblings. And that forces us to confront the silent crises of individual identity.
This marks the crucial psychological transition from adolescence into adulthood, where we shift from seeking safety from our parents to seeking validation from our peers, and eventually from societal institutions.
The book introduces this phase with a painfully relatable story of the invisible high schooler. High school is such a psychological pressure cooker.
He really is.
In this story, we have a student who is deeply invested in an unrequited friendship. They are the ultimate supporting character in someone else's drama. They listen to this friend's problems late into the night, they cover for them, they care deeply, they give and give and give.
A very one-sided dynamic.
And then one day, the supposed friend just walks right past them in the crowded hallway without even a nod, entirely focused on someone else who is deemed more popular or useful.
It is the crushing, humiliating realization of invisibility. It is the painful understanding that you are only seen when it is convenient or necessary for someone else's narrative.
It completely shatters the student's self-worth. They go into a spiral, asking themselves, why am I not enough? What is wrong with me? They withdraw, they start eating lunch in quiet corners, trying to shrink themselves so they can't be hurt again.
A classic withdrawal response.
But the real revelation comes when they start journaling to process the pain. Through writing, they realized that their entire sense of self-worth had been outsourced. It was entirely tied to how others perceive them.
The authors emphasize that this deeply painful realization is a necessary, almost universal rite of passage. The heartbreak of an unrequited friendship is the catalyst that forces the student to recognize the danger of outsourcing their self-esteem.
I read this chapter and I immediately thought of an analogy. Seeking external validation is exactly like feeding coins into a broken vending machine.
I like where this is going.
You walk up to it, you put your effort, your love, your time into the slot, you press the button, nothing happens. So you keep putting in more effort, you start shaking the machine, you get frustrated and angry, waiting for the relationship or the approval to drop down into the tray.
Waiting for a reward that isn't coming.
You wonder why your self-worth isn't dispensing. But the reality is, the machine is unplugged. It is incapable of giving you what you need. You have to stop feeding the machine and learn to generate that worth internally.
That is an excellent, highly accurate analogy. When we rely on external validation, we are putting our emotional regulation in the hands of unplugged machines. And this concept applies perfectly to the next narrative, which scales this problem up.
It scales up big time.
It shifts from the social pressures of high school youth to the massive systemic institutional pressures of adulthood. This is the story of the unfulfilled academic.
This story is the absolute textbook definition of a midlife identity crisis. We have a person who has reached the absolute pinnacle of what we call the ivory tower. They have the PhDs, the tenured position, the prestige, the acclaim from their peers. To the outside world, their life looks like a massive success story.
It looks perfect on paper.
But inside, it's a hollow, exhausting nightmare.
Because the currency of their world, much like the high schooler's friendship, has revealed itself to be completely hollow.
Exactly. They describe the reality of their daily life. Publishing research isn't a pursuit of genuine, world-changing inquiry anymore. It is just a currency to keep their career alive and appease the university board.
It becomes a performance.
They are sacrificing their weekends, they are constantly postponing relationships, they are alienating their non-academic friends because they are always too busy, and teaching the one thing they originally loved has been reduced to a nightmare of administrative burdens and standardized performance metrics.
The joy is completely gone.
They wake up one morning and realize they have devoted their entire life, their best years, to an academic machine that doesn't actually care about them as a human being.
What's truly fascinating here is the psychological terror of stepping away. The academic is forced to ask a terrifying question. If I am not Professor so-and-so outside the university walls, who am I?
They have no idea.
They realized that their relentless pursuit of prestige was actually masking a deep, unhealed need for validation.
It's the broken vending machine again, just on $1 million scale. If you are listening to this right now on your commute to a job you hate, I want you to ask yourself, how much of your current daily stress is tied to a title you don't even care about anymore?
That is a tough question to face.
Are you sacrificing your weekends and your health just to keep up appearances for a corporate or institutional machine that would replace you by next Tuesday if you drop dead?
It is a profound existential confrontation. The academic ultimately chooses to step away, which is a terrifying leap into the void we discussed earlier. They leave the only identity they have ever known.
Kierkegaard's void again.
Exactly. But in doing so, they rediscover the pure, unadulterated joy of teaching by volunteering to tutor underprivileged kids outside the formal educational system. There are no institutional accolades. There are no performance metrics or tenure tracks. Just the sheer intrinsic love of sharing knowledge.
Just pure connection.
The authors use this powerful pivot to frame their concept of the evolution of self.
Okay, let's unpack this. Explain the mechanism behind that. What exactly is the evolution of self?
The evolution of self is the philosophical idea that as we age, we must actively embrace and accept ambiguity. From childhood, we are conditioned to think of identity as a fixed, final destination.
Like checking a box.
You study, you become an engineer, a mother, a professor, and that is who you are forever. You cast it in bronze. But true self-awareness and psychological resilience require recognizing that identity is inherently fluid. It is a process, not a statue.
We're always changing.
We have to shed the need to perform for others, shed the labels we've outgrown, and become comfortable with being a perpetual work in progress. It's a necessary shedding of old skins.
And when you shed that skin, when you finally unplug the broken vending machine and stop living for your resume, what fills the void? If you aren't living for external validation anymore, what are you actually living for?
That is the ultimate question.
That brings us to the final major evolution discussed in the book. Once we transition away from protecting our identity, we start thinking about our legacy.
This is a vital distinction. Identity is largely about how the world sees you. Legacy is not just about what you accomplished on paper, it's about the tangible imprint you leave on the world and the resources you leave for the people who follow you.
The first story that illustrates this is about an incredibly successful painter. Let's call it the artist's silent brush. This artist has achieved massive critical acclaim. Their gallery shows are packed with wealthy buyers.
They've made it.
Art critics are writing glowing reviews about their brilliant technique, praising their innovative blending of abstraction and realism. But standing in the middle of a crowded gallery opening, sipping champagne, the artist feels entirely disconnected and deeply depressed.
Success without fulfillment.
The critics are praising the surface aesthetics, the brushstrokes, the color theory, but they are completely missing the messy, chaotic, vulnerable soul of the work. The artist feels profoundly isolated by their own massive success.
It is the ultimate paradox of the creator, creating a piece of your soul for the world, only to feel more isolated when the world applauds the frame rather than the picture. Recognition, as they discover, does not equal connection.
Right. So one night, the artist is alone in their studio, feeling like they want to quit painting entirely. They are digging through a closet and they find an old, dusty cardboard box.
A literal box from the past.
Inside are their own childhood drawings. Just simple, unburdened, joyful, technically terrible sketches of dragons and houses. And looking at those raw, authentic lines sparks a total psychological renewal.
A return to the roots.
The artist realizes they lost the joy when art became a performance, so they decide to host free, judgment-free art workshops for local children in their studio. No critiques, no grades, no expectations of good art.
Just pure creation.
And by watching these kids create with pure, unfiltered wonder, smearing paint with their hands, laughing that the artist's own internal palette brightens, they reconnect with their own inner child, they stop worrying about gallery critics and start collaborating with local musicians and writers.
They systematically transform their art from an isolated, elite performance into an accessible bridge for community connection. The brush is no longer silent. It is speaking a communal language.
So what does this all mean for us? To me, it means that success without community is just a different, highly decorated kind of heartbreak.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And speaking of stepping out of a singular, defined identity, we have the incredibly moving story of the retiree, John.
From a sociological and psychological perspective, Retirement is one of the most significant and often traumatic identity shifts a human being can experience in modern society. We dramatically underestimate the psychological toll of suddenly losing your daily purpose.
John experiences exactly that. The book describes the jarring, deafening silence of 5:00 p.m. on the final day of his 30-year corporate career. He walks into his house, sets down his briefcase for the last time, looks around his quiet living room, and just feels this overwhelming, suffocating void.
He's entirely lost his map.
He hasn't just lost a paycheck, he has lost his primary identity. He doesn't know who he is if he isn't managing a team and solving daily crises.
He is standing squarely at the crossroads of Kierkegaard's nothingness again. The tether has been cut.
Yes. But instead of sinking into despair and just watching television for the rest of his life, John leans into a tiny, forgotten impulse. He remembers an old passion he had before his career took over: sketching.
He goes back to something pure.
He goes up to the attic, dusts off a 30-year-old sketch pad, buys some new pencils, and takes a huge risk by signing up for a local beginner's art class at a community center. And there, amidst the awkwardness of being a beginner again, he meets a vibrant woman named Sarah.
A new connection.
He finds a completely new community of people who don't care what his corporate title used to be. He starts exhibiting his art at tiny local fairs. He and Sarah take road trips to paint landscapes. They start painting massive community murals together in underserved neighborhoods. He connects deeply with his own teenage grandchildren by teaching them how to draw. He realizes that retirement isn't an end, it's a completely blank canvas.
John's story perfectly illustrates that legacy is fluid and active. He isn't just resting on the laurels of his corporate past. He's weaving his past organizational skills and his newly rediscovered creativity into a vibrant present. He learns that creativity, much like life itself, is an ongoing process, not a final destination.
It's never really finished.
And this idea of navigating the harsh cycles of life, of accepting the death of one thing to birth another, brings us to the final, perhaps most profound story in the book. The farmer, Samuel.
Samuel's story is so deeply grounded, literally and figuratively. He is a man working land that has been in his family for 4 generations. His identity is literally tied to the soil. But he is facing a terrifying existential threat: a devastating, multi-year climate drought, coupled with the looming, crushing shadow of massive industrial corporate agriculture threatening to buy him out for pennies.
A massive external force he can't control.
Day after day, he watches the crops his father taught him to plant turn to dry, lifeless dust. He hits an absolute wall of despair. The heartbreak is tied to the physical death of his legacy.
But the crucial element of Samuel's story is that he does not surrender to the despair.
No, he allows his heart to break for the old way of doing things, and then he pivots. He completely reimagines his relationship with the land. He dives headfirst into learning about regenerative agriculture.
He changes his entire methodology.
He abandons the generational practices that were depleting the soil and starts using complex crop rotation and cover cropping. He shifts his entire philosophy from extracting value from the dirt to nurturing the microbiome of the soil. Slowly, painstakingly, the land begins to heal. It starts retaining water again.
The resilience of nature.
And more than that, Samuel turns his revitalized farm into a community hub. He brings in school groups from the city to show them where food comes from. He hosts free workshops for other struggling local farmers. He teaches the next generation how to dance with the rhythms of nature instead of trying to violently dominate it.
This represents a profound philosophical and spiritual shift. To analyze Samuel's journey, I want to bring in Friedrich Nietzsche's concept of amor fati,
Amor fati.
which translates to the love of one's fate. Samuel didn't waste his energy fighting the undeniable reality of the drought, nor did he simply play the victim to the changing landscape of global agriculture. He embraced the destruction as his fate, and he adapted to it.
He worked with it.
The authors beautifully articulate that heartbreak, hardship, and even environmental devastation are essentially the compost for our legacy. The painful destruction of his father's old way of farming literally became the fertile soil for a much richer, more ecologically and socially connected future.
The compost for our legacy. I absolutely love that phrasing. It takes something we view as gross and discarded and recognizes it as the ultimate source of future growth. It shows that legacy isn't some cold, rigid marble statue we build in a town square to commemorate our own ego.
No, it's alive.
True legacy is a garden we plant. We cultivate the soil with our own heartbreak, we plant the seeds, and we do it knowing full well that others will harvest the fruit long after we are gone.
And that metaphor perfectly synthesizes the entire overarching message of Threads. The book meticulously takes us through the unavoidable cycle of heartbreak and healing.
It really covers every angle.
Whether you are a programmer terrified of showing your true self on a coffee date, an immigrant aching for the familiarity of your village, a grandmother hiding your letters out of misguided love, or a farmer staring down at dry soil, the violent cracking of the heart is exactly how the light of empathy gets in.
It's how we grow.
Heartbreak, in all its forms, is the ultimate proof of life. It activates the exact same pain centers in the brain as a physical wound because connection is biologically essential to our survival as a species. When we grieve a loss, whether of a person, an identity, or a dream, we are fundamentally honoring the profound depth of our capacity to connect.
It is the inescapable price of admission for a deeply meaningful human experience. If you construct a life completely insulated from heartbreak, if you never take the risk of loving someone, if you never send the text, if you never move to the city, if you never share your amateur art with the world, you might successfully avoid the pain.
You might stay safe.
You might stay comfortable, but you are also completely insulating yourself from joy, from ambition, and from deep, authentic connection. You end up living in Kierkegaard's void anyway, just without any of the beautiful memories or scars to show for it.
The sharp pain of heartbreak means you were brave enough to take the risk in the first place. And leaning into that vulnerability rather than running from it is the only genuine path to psychological and spiritual renewal.
So thinking back to where we started this deep dive today, that terrifying feeling of the ground dropping out from beneath you, that sudden, sharp, breath-stealing pain of a broken reality, it isn't a glitch. It isn't an anomaly. It's the blueprint of human growth.
It's the design.
And I want to leave you with a lingering, slightly uncomfortable question to mull over on your own today. Based on everything we've explored, I want you to look at your own life right now and ask yourself, what are you currently avoiding? What deferred dream, what difficult conversation, what massive leap of faith are you running away from right now simply because you are terrified of getting hurt?